Hey everybody, welcome back to TeslaTex. I'm Lane Rogers, and today we're going to be talking a lot about the SpaceX IPO, and then we're going to also talk a little bit about what happened with the New Glenn rocket the other day. Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' company over there, they had a major explosion on the launch pad. About, I guess it's going on almost a week ago, and we got some big updates yesterday from Dave Limp, their CEO. And it's some pretty optimistic updates. So we're hoping to see Blue Origin take the skies again before the end of 2026, those are pretty ambitious goals if you ask me. But some really good news to share there. And then, but let's get back to the SpaceX IPO. This is going to be something like a $1.8 trillion IPO. I know originally they were targeting around $2 trillion. But this IPO is historic. I mean, this is going to be the largest IPO in IPO history. And so their plans are to you're looking to raise somewhere around $75 to $80 billion, which is just absolutely huge. That is the largest amount of money raised I've heard of in IPO. So this fantastic. And it's so good. It's so good to see SpaceX finally taking the next steps to finally go public. Like Tesla's been public for a long time, and so this has been needed for a while just because of all the development with Starship and the AI infrastructure they're doing, and just everything they're doing with Anthropic and Colossus, and so they need investment. So this is going to be a really good to see. Now I think the roadshow for this starts tomorrow. That's June 4th, 2026, and so this is going to be sort of like where they start talking to their main investors, and they put all of the pricing together and things like that. So we're expecting pricing somewhere around, between now and June 11th. But someone's saying, I was reading on X this morning that pricing is looking at about $135 a share. Now that's the initial IPO price. That won't be necessarily what retail investors, just everyday investors can, pick it up on E-Trade or Charles Schwab or something like that. Obviously, because it's the pre-IPO price, basically. So when it goes on the open market, it's predicted to spike a lot, even up to maybe $200 or something, as some of the experts are saying. But they are, what I've seen, what I've read, they're looking at doing like a 30% retail allocation, which is that's very generous, very generous. I mean, if you think about like the average IPO out there, only having an allocation of 5 to 10%, and that's generous. And so I think that's pretty cool of SpaceX, just to be like, wow, let's put 30% out there for the average investor. You don't have to be a certified investor or one of their larger investors in order to be able to access that stock. So we'll see how it goes. This is still kind of early. They're kind of putting everything together within the roadshow. They just did their basic S1 filing back on May 20th of 26. And so there's been a lot of progress and a lot of talk back and forth and a lot of chatter out there about, what the initial IPO price was going to be and things like that. But, it's looking very solid, about around $135. And I'm not sure if that's going to be like after a 5-1 split or something like that. I know there were some early talks about, them possibly doing a split because the original price was too high for most retail investors. And so to, obviously attract more retail investors, things like that, they were going to do a split, but I'm not sure if they're still talking about even doing that. But I know that was one thing they were looking at doing. Another thing, which I think is great, is that Elon is going to be withholding about 85% of the voting rights, and so he's going to keep him. He's going to own more control of the yes or no pie, basically on decisions, and so he's going to retain that, and so he won't be outvoted by anyone or any investor, any large investor, or even probably the board. He's going to have a lot more control over his company, over SpaceX, and over probably future companies that kind of are subsidiaries of SpaceX going forward. So I think that's absolutely a good move on Elon's part. He's always thinking ahead, making sure that he's in charge and that he's running things and he doesn't let it get out of control, which is a good thing. I think it's always good to see the people at the top do things right and structure things right so that they don't lose control of the empires they built, because historically you've seen some pretty bad ones. And so I think Elon's doing it right with SpaceX and this IPO. Another fantastic thing, obviously I'm in San Antonio, Texas here, but the Texas headquarters, is up in Austin, up there at Giga Texas. And I know back, I think it was 24, I believe, when they made Texas their headquarters state, and they reincorporated from Delaware, where a lot of companies incorporate, to Texas. And so now they're incorporated in Texas. And so this is actually going to be, the SpaceX ticker is SPCX, but it's on NASDAQ. And then I don't know if y'all have seen, but recently Texas has their own version of NASDAQ. And so we're listed on the Texas NASDAQ under SPCX for SpaceX. And so that's pretty cool. And one of the really cool things about that is that Texas recognizes dual class shares. And so in other words, I think you have A and B class shares, and A class shares are basically one vote per share. And then the B class shares, you get 10 votes. And so obviously Elon is getting a lot more of those B class shares, which gets into that number, that 85% of the retaining 85% of the voting rights. And so smart move there, and it's great to see that he took that move to bring and incorporate in Texas, and that we're on the NASDAQ, which is huge, and that we're also going to be the Texas NASDAQ. So that's going to be incorporated into the Texas NASDAQ. So pretty neat there. It's cool. It's cool to see Texas doing so many things and bringing so much business here. And it seems like every single day there's a new company, new tech company, new AI data center coming here. So it's however, I do wish San Antonio would get a little bit more of the tech-centric companies that move here. We see it in Austin. We've always seen it in Austin for years and years, and then Dallas, Fort Worth, that whole area is exploding with these tech companies. But we just really hadn't attracted too much here, and I'm not sure what needs to be done about that. I'm not sure what San Antonio is doing to attract those companies, but obviously it's not enough because we're not getting enough. But San Antonio is growing, and it's I know we've gotten a couple like Microsoft data centers and things like that. So we're seeing some progress, and so we'll get there. We'll get there, I promise. But so yeah, I'm excited about that. Another thing I found very interesting is that SpaceX and Tesla are actually kind of talking about merging. And as an investor, a person that's followed Tesla since the very beginning, and I think I bought some Tesla stock on the first day they went public, and been invested ever since, and love Tesla, followed the brand, follow everything Elon does and all his companies. But from that perspective, I think it's an excellent idea, really, just because a lot of there's so many synergies between these companies already, and they already work together in so many different capacities, and they've partnered together in so many different things. And I don't know, like recently Elon announced that they're building that TerraFab right there on site at Giga Texas, and it's a collaboration between SpaceX, Tesla, XAI, kind of all together right there, and they're going to be working on advanced technologies, advanced chip design and fabrication, and lots of different like space technology, Starlink technologies, all right there at Giga Texas. And so they're already collaborating. And then you think about like you see the Cybercabs in Austin, they're all using Starlink, and Tesla has used Starlink repeatedly with Optimus for link ups and things like that for presentations they've done and things like that. And then the full self-driving, and then the robotaxi and Cybercab service. And so there's all sorts of collaboration they've already done. And then if you think about how AI and Colossus, it's all sort of uniting it all together anyway. And then you talk about like SpaceX doing space-based data centers and data centers on the moon, those types of things for obvious reasons. It makes sense that they would merge, and I think it would create this. I think someone said just like almost a $3.5 to $4 trillion entity, this company, which would be absolutely astronomical and huge. And I think it would lead to being able to scale more, produce better efficiencies for them to be merged. It would also lead to increased profitability, better technologies, and just overall congruence between them. And they would have the legal framework in order to be able to move back and forth and work together in a higher capacity and create those new synergies going forward. So yeah, I think that's going to be a something to keep our eye on. They were talking about, first they got to get SpaceX public, just get that done, and kind of get the pricing out, get everybody on board, and then maybe in late 26, 27, I think you'll start to see more and more of that talk about that merger. But yeah, just big things happening at Tesla, big things happening with SpaceX, and I'm excited. I think June 12th is the first day that it's supposed to actually go public, where retail investors can get a hold of it. You know what I mean? Like it's through your basic accounts, and so I'm excited to pick up some SpaceX shares for sure, and I'm interested to see where. After that first couple of days of trading, where the price ends. If they had the IPO at $135, basically, 200, 250. I'm wondering where it's going to kind of peak out in this first few days, first week. But I mean, space is unlimited. The space economy is unlimited. Never bet against Elon. People have said that before, and so I think now more than ever, don't bet against Elon. So it's like, I think if you're an investor, it's something to keep an eye on. Obviously, it's not investing advice, or not that kind of advice, but yeah, it's a very interesting company to keep your eye on, SpaceX, and they're doing things that no one else has been able to do. NASA wasn't even able to do, and they've scaled things and built things that NASA could not do, and they've done it for, like, I think the number I read was like 10% of the cost. And so, it's just, look what they've been able to accomplish. Look what Elon's been able to accomplish. It's absolutely phenomenal, and just it's not matched by anybody else. And so, I'm definitely going to be. I know for me, for one, I'm going to be invested in SpaceX as soon as I can get my hands on it. And I've been very happy being a Tesla investor for all these years. I have some funny stories about how I got involved with it, and I'll share those at some point. But I had a lot of Tesla shares in the beginning, then had some things come up, had to sell a bunch, and then I got back in a couple of years later. But I always kind of look back and go, wow, if I had some of those original shares, that would be nice. And I do have some, but I started investing heavily a little bit later. But I've done well with Tesla. And how can you not? I mean, the company is growing by leaps and bounds, and they're exploring and doing things that no other company is doing, and nobody else can keep up with. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about what Tesla's done. There's a lot of misinformation about what SpaceX is doing, and I think the average person out there, the average investor, the average consumer, is starting finally, just right now, is starting to absorb into their psyche, the full self-driving and the added safety benefits of owning a Tesla, and just all the added benefits of driving an electric vehicle together. And they're also learning that they're not dangerous like all these the myths out there are about electric vehicles, and they're probably not going to explode on you. It's not a fire hazard any more than any other the vehicle, actually. But it's actually far less likely to catch on fire than any other vehicle. So especially gasoline vehicles. And so, yeah, it's been a learning curve, and you're just starting to see people figure all this stuff out. And it's cool to see, because, like I said, I've been in it since the beginning, and I was kind of an early adopter of the philosophy of Tesla, and became an investor from day one, and then ended up buying a lot of Tesla products over the years. And so I'm excited, and I'm really hoping the IPO goes well, and that it's historic. Like I said, it's like $1.8 trillion IPO, and they're raising $1.8 trillion valuation, and they're raising somewhere between $75 and $85 billion. That's the goal. And then obviously they're going to be reinvesting into things like Starship, Starlink, and all their other launch vehicles and things like that. And then on top of that, a lot more AI training, and a lot more a lot more of the infrastructure they're building with Colossus and even SpaceX's own AI systems and things like that. So great news there, guys. Now let's talk a little bit about Blue Origin and New Glenn. They had that explosion the other day down in Cape Canaveral. It was going to be, I believe, their fourth flight, and they had this tremendous explosion right there on the launch pad. And from every account that I saw, all the videos, all the pictures, the aftermath, everything, it just looked like a total devastation, to be honest, man. Everything was just wiped out. That explosion, that blast was absolutely incredible. I mean, it looked like a nuclear warhead going off from a distance. I mean, it mushroom cloud, all the things. And so so many people were saying, it's going to be maybe 2028 before we get Blue Origin back in the sky. And so, back doing missions. And so that kind of threw a wrench in the gears for the Artemis program, because they were heavily dependent on Blue Origin, especially getting that Blue Moon lander up to the moon surface, which they've been developing over the last several years, specifically to go to the moon right now, basically, on the first mission in the next few months, by the end of the summer. And so obviously that's out now, unless they were able to find a different transport vehicle, like SpaceX Super Heavy has been thrown out there. We'll see. It'd have to be heavily modified, I believe, but it can be done, it seems, according to the experts. Dave Limp, which is the CEO of Blue Origin, came out yesterday and was saying that after they did some pretty serious site surveying and looking at all the damage, and they're going to be able to get, they think they're going to be able to get Blue Origin back launching, getting in the air back by the end of 2026, which is super ambitious. But if anybody can do it, if anybody can do it, it'd be like SpaceX. But obviously Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos, he's got unlimited resources, unlimited funds, and access to the best experts in the world, the best engineers, the best people. And I think they're going to be able to pull this off, guys, especially with the funding and the pressure behind them from NASA and everybody else, all the providers that need this done. They need the Artemis missions to continue in a reasonable timeline in order to get it all done, because there's a lot behind it, a lot of companies depending on it, governments depending on it, and so I think they're going to get it done. They said that the main water tower looks good, which that must be a really strong water tower. That's all I got to say. The main support tower has a lot of damage, but supposedly they're going to be able to repair that in place instead of demolishing it and having to ship everything out and then rebuild a whole new support tower. And then they have the transporter erector, which was a little bit different launch situation setup for New Glenn. Basically, it rolled out with the rocket laying down, and then it just put it vertical, and then it could blast off from there, and then it went back, basically. So that was their system, and they said that they were in the process of eliminating that anyway, and they had a whole new launch system set up that it's not going to be a transporter type launch system that they were building anyway. So they're just going to build that in place, and obviously we don't need to build a new transporter because they weren't going to use that type of system anyway going forward. So that's fantastic. All the propellant tanks, oxygen tanks, all that kind of stuff that was on the ground, not damaged, and they said that's phenomenal because the lead time to get those new replaced was really long. So that was one of the things that people were saying, if they had to replace, could put us in the 28. And so things look pretty good. I know they had a couple of buildings there that were holding some, Blue Origin parts, and I think there was a second stage in there or something like that, lower stage. And it seems like everything looks good there, and there's no damage there, so they'll be able to use those components in future flights. And so, everything else is just clean up, paint, I guess, and putting it back together, recalibrating. And I'm sure this kind of like 6-7 month window they're going to have, I think they're going to, be able to do their homework, really look at the data they've been able to collect in the first few flights in New Glenn, make those adaptations into the new rocket that's going to launch next, and get everything prepped and ready, and really be ready as soon as their launch site's ready down there in Cape Canaveral. They'll be able to launch this thing probably for the end of the year and get back on track and catch up if they had to a little bit, and get back to the Artemis mission and get back to launching, obviously, Amazon Leo satellites into orbit, which is basically Amazon and Blue Origin's version of Starlink, which they're just getting moving with. So it's gonna be good to see New Glenn be able to add that support and do that as well, because the future's in space. Obviously, Starlink's growing leaps and bounds, and then Amazon Leo is going to be up there providing internet from space, but also things like broadband, like cell phone type coverage and things like that as we go forward. The next generation of Starlinks, which are going up in Starship, are much bigger and are going to be able to do a whole lot more, and will eventually replace the cell phone, replace all this technology, and everything will be Starlink or Leo, satellite based, as these constellations grow and as they get more proficient and the technology improves. Well, that about wraps it up today, guys. But with SpaceX having $18.7 billion in revenue in 2025, they have a very bright future, trust me. And so I'm excited to see everything in the works. I'm excited about the IPO. SPCX, that's the ticker. So check it out, see what you think. And as usual, if you like this kind of content, if you like this video, like, share, and subscribe, because the future is moving fast and TeslaTex is here to cover it. Thanks, guys. See you on the next video. Thanks for watching.